welcome to the OklaRoots YouTube channel. In today's tutorial, we're going over such a cool idea. Today, we're gonna make a convertible backpack. It can be a backpack or it can be a shoulder bag. You can probably make it a crossbody strap as well. Today, we're going over the Rose convertible backpack from Justyna THandmade. Let me just show you how adorable this bag is, and then we will discuss my love for Justyna, okay? So this little backpack is so cute. So you can see this is how it looks just like as a shoulder bag, and I'm gonna show you it on and where it hangs and all of that in just a moment. We have two front pockets. We have this adorable little zip pocket right here, ba-bam. We have a magnetic slip pocket right there, and then flip it around to the back. The back, we have another little secret pocket, which you guys, you know what? I am seeing this all over the place on backpack patterns and also on store-bought bags. These back panel zipper pockets, it's perfect. That's where you put your cell phone, your wallet, your passport, whatever you don't want potentially pickpocketed when you're traveling. That's where it goes because it's touching your back. No, you can't. It's very hard to break into that. You know what I mean? So that's like a little secret pocket back here that I love. And then on the top, we have a magnetic snap. Open that up, and then it's just kind of like a bucket bag, you know? It's just nice, big space in here. There is a slip pocket inside. There's no zipper pockets. As always with bags, get creative if you want to add another slip pocket, if you want to add a zipper pocket. You can really add whatever you want to the lining of this bag. So, you can see when I pull on the handle, this is a little shoulder bag, right? But we've got these awesome grommets on the top here. So if I pull these straps a bit like this, now it is a little mini backpack, which is perfect for moms. It's perfect for teens. So this is what it looks like. You can see it is a smaller backpack. I would not say this is like a school backpack. I know that some kids are gonna wanna use it for school. It's not big enough for like a laptop or for like a big notebook, but it's definitely big enough for your wallet, for your iPad, all of your necessities. Great for travel. I mean, I love this bag so much. We've got purse feet on the bottom and a very structured base. So sometimes with these bags, you know, once we load it up, it's got a little loosey-goosey, droopy bottom. You know what I mean? It's not like that. This is a very firm base. You can put stuff in it. It's not gonna start drooping. You have your purse feet to protect it. I cannot rave enough about this bag. It is so adorable. All right, so let's talk about some of the features of this bag. You can see we do have rivets and we do have grommets. I did use my cam snaps rivet press right over there. I use those to install all of that. I do not use a hammer. I do not cut out these holes here. Everything from the hole punch to installing this hardware here was done on my rivet press. I will have links for all of the tools down in the description of this video. You don't need it, however, trust me, a rivet press just makes life so much easier. So if you're interested in that, I will also have a link down in the description of this video for my whole spiel, my whole overview of what I think about my rivet press and the dies and the tools that come with it. We do have connectors down here, so you can remove these straps if you want to and use them for something else. So this is something that's new to me that I've seen a lot of people using. For the straps of this bag, we're using nylon webbing, which is seatbelt webbing. It feels like a seatbelt because it is. It's the same material. It's a seatbelt webbing. And the nice thing about this is that it's so durable. It's so easy to work with. And you don't have to make a strap. I mean, I know I love making a customized strap for my bags just as much as you do. But if I don't have to make that strap at the end of the bag making, I can just kind of stick this on there. I am all for it. So you can see we have it just like this. It works so great. So one of the things that Justyna does, and I've seen this in a lot of her patterns, and I absolutely love it, is she has this really like customized design detail where the exterior of pockets kind of wrap over into the lining. So I want to show you the slip pocket here first. So you see how we have this exterior panel right here? And then when you open up the slip pocket, you still see it. It wraps over and the lining starts further down. We also have that on the top of this bag where the exterior wraps down and the lining starts further. The lining doesn't start right up here at the top. It starts further down. Now, from a design perspective, I mean, I showed this bag to my mom and she loved that. She thought that was such a classy look to a bag where you don't have that seam just running right along the top of the bag. She loved that it folded over. So it looks really, really cool. But from a bag making perspective, especially a newbie bag maker, it's so much easier to top stitch this. If you've made some of these bags where we have that seam between the lining and the exterior right along the top up here, and you're using any sort of thick material like vinyl, maybe even waterproof canvas, you know when you top stitch right here, right there, right where the exterior of the front and the back meet and the lining meet, right there, it is so bulky. We break needles, we skip stitches, our thread breaks, it looks a mess, we try to figure out how to clean it up. That is such a difficult area to top stitch over, even for experienced bag makers. But because we're wrapping this down and we're not having the seam between the lining and the exterior up here, I mean, look at that. Can you see how thin that is? It is not bulky. Top stitching over this right here is no more difficult than top stitching over the front of it. I love that. That's why I think this is a great beginner bag. Yes, you're going to have to get your little ruler out and finagle the fold over and everything like that, which just takes a little bit of time, but it is not difficult, but you're not gonna break a needle, at least on this part. So, highly recommend this bag. I know this is a long intro to this because I love this idea so much. Justyna, thank you so much for allowing me to use your patterns in my tutorial. Of course, the link for this will be down in the description. Please go check out her Etsy shop. She has so many unique designs. I highly encourage you to try them all out. If you see another one you want us to do a video over, leave it down in the comment section. So if you're new to the OklaRoots YouTube channel, please consider clicking the subscribe link down below. If you like this video at any point, please give it a like. Any questions, comments, shout outs, anything at all you want to say, leave them down in the comments section. There will be timestamps for this tutorial. They will be in the description of this video. If you just go over to the little arrow over here and click it, the description will expand and you'll find all the links to the products, to other videos, as well as the timestamps. You can also just hover over the video and the timestamps will just show up right along here, right along the bottom. All right, let's get started. All right, so for this backpack, you're gonna have an accent panel. It's gonna be that front zipper pocket. I am in the spooky mood, so I've got me some Haunted Mansion fabric here that I'm so excited about. So you're just gonna need about a fat quarter of your accent fabric. You may also want a small cut of waterproof canvas. This is gonna go on the front of the bag. You can use vinyl for this cut on the front accent, but I would just test it out with this first. Make sure your machine is pretty good at handling thicker layers because we are going to start stacking up a lot of layers here. To just keep it as easy as possible, I'm using waterproof canvas. This is OtterTex waterproof canvas, which is a little bit on the firmer, stiffer side. So these will be used for the front of the bag, and then for the rest of the bag, all the vinyl part will be this vinyl here, which is a heat changing color vinyl, which is really cool. So I'm gonna put my hand on here for just a moment. And then when I lift it up, do you see that? Look at that. It changes color in the heat. So it's really cool when you go from inside to outside. If you wear your bag inside, it's black. You wear it outside, it changes to a different color. This one's changing to that white. It's like an X-ray effect, but they have other colors that change to purple, orange. It's so much fun. So about a ½ yard of vinyl for the exterior of the bag. And then for the lining of the bag, you're gonna want a ½ yard. And I am using waterproof canvas. However, it's not the same waterproof canvas as this. This is OtterTex waterproof canvas. It's very thick, very firm. Great for exterior bags. This waterproof canvas comes to us from Wonderground Fabrics, which is also where this fabric comes here, and it's more lightweight. So this is gonna be great for linings because I still don't have to interface this, which is why I like to use waterproof canvas, because with quilt cotton, I have to interface it. Don't have to interface this. There's no stretch, there's no fray, it's just perfect, but it's a little bit more lightweight, so I don't have to worry about really bulky seams when I'm layering it up, versus if I use this waterproof canvas, I would. All right, next we have our interfacing, and honestly, I'm using a very small amount of each one of these. First, I have Decoville Light. This is just gonna be for the front of the bag, for that front pocket to kind of firm it up. You can also use fusible fleece here. You don't have to use Decoville Light. Next, I have my Pellon SF101, which is a woven interfacing. I'm only using this on my quilt cotton. So that front accent piece with that little lady in a ball, this is gonna be used with that just to make sure it doesn't fray, doesn't stretch. That's it. If you're using quilt cotton for your lining, you're probably gonna wanna use this on that as well, just to make sure the bag lasts as long as possible. It just protects the fabric. Next, I have a piece of Decoville Heavy. Decoville Heavy is just gonna be used for the base of the bag. Now this actually, I would not skip this. I would make sure you do this because the base of the bag is very firm and it's just fantastic. I love the base of this bag. So Decoville Heavy for sure. This Decoville Light is completely optional. I would add woven interfacing on any quilt cotton or cotton woven material. So first, my ruler, 1 inch by 6 inch ruler. I really feel like this is every bag maker's must have. You're just gonna use it so much for placement and everything. So I have my ruler. I'm using 4 purse feet. The pattern calls for 5. I work well with 4. We'll talk about that when we get to that step. I also have some rivets here. I'm using the 9mm by 8mm rivets. I have a scrap of fusible fleece. This is for help with installing the magnetic snaps, installing the bag tag, all of that stuff. And then I have 1 inch webbing. Now this is like, it feels like seatbelt. It's what it's called. It's called seatbelt webbing, and it feels like a seatbelt. And you can get it in a lot of different designs, which is so cool. So I'm using that today for the straps. You could also make your own straps, but this is way easier. And then I have my zipper tape. We're gonna be having 2 zippers today, so I just have a nice long piece of zipper tape, and I'll cut it as we go. For my zippers, I have 2 zipper pulls. Next, I have my thread. I'm using a Tex 45 thread. Now, this is a little bit more heavy duty, but it does work in the top needle on my Bernina 770. It does not work for me in the bobbin. So for the bobbin, I'm just using this good old-fashioned Gutermann polyester thread from Joann's. For marking things, I have my air erasing marker and my vinyl pen. Always healthy supply of clips, and my seam ripper and stiletto combo. Next, I have grommets. Now, you don't need a rivet press to do this, but I have it, so I'm going to use it. I'm going to be using 12mm grommets, and then I have my 12mm grommet press as well as the hole punch die. This just makes installing the grommets on the top of the bag so easy. You're going to have 2 sets of magnetic snaps. I have my bag tag here. I'm going to use a metal one, 2 1-inch swivel hooks, 2 1-inch sliders, and 2 1-inch D-rings. For my sticky stuff, I've got my Dritz 1/4-inch wash away tape and also some Beacon 3-in-1 glue, and my needles, as always, are Schmetz Microtex 8012. Okay, so the pattern is written in a kind of cut as you go way. So there is a cut list, but it can be a little confusing figuring out where everything goes and what it's for. So we're gonna run through that real quick. So for the front of the bag, this is all the stuff for the front of the bag. We have our accent fabric top and our accent fabric bottom. Both of these are quilt cotton, so they both have the woven interface already applied to them. And then when we look at the back, you can see I've also attached the Decoville light. Now, pay attention to the space here. The Decoville light is not the same size as your accent panels. That's a little bit shorter. So at the top of the bottom accent and the bottom of the top accent, you shouldn't have any Decoville light. This is where we're gonna install a zipper, so we want this to be thinner. All right, next we have 3 lining pieces, and they're all just a little bit different in size. So just make sure you're paying attention to the sizing. But you can see we have 3 pieces of lining here. This is all for the pocket. This is for the zip pocket, and then behind the zip pocket is actually going to be a slit pocket, so we have some lining for that as well. Next, we have the waterproof canvas, and this is gonna be the top of the bag. So I'll show you, it goes a little bit like this. Your pocket kind of goes over this front piece of your bag, and then you're gonna attach these 2 side strips for the top part of your front bag, and then the bottom is going to be a piece of vinyl, which we will attach down here. We're gonna walk through all of this. I just want you to kind of see where all the pieces go. Now, I'm not gonna give you the measurements, obviously, in the video. You will have to look at the cut sheet for that. Okay, next up is the back piece of your bag. So this is just that vinyl, which I like to play with. And then this piece of lining here, you're gonna have a little zip pocket. This lovely little back of the backpack, hidden zip pocket's gonna go right at the top, and this will just be the lining for that zip pocket. After that, we have the lining. This is the interior of the bag. You're gonna have 2 larger cuts. This is just the lining panels, and you're gonna have another cut that's just a little bit smaller than these ones. This is for a slip pocket that's gonna go inside the lining. We don't have any zippers inside the lining today. All right, and just a couple of extras. We have our Decoville Heavy. You're gonna have 2 cuts of Decoville Heavy. We are going to stack them up. It makes it very firm. It's a fantastic base. And then a small cut of vinyl, and this is actually going to be for that little handle that goes on the top of your bag. All right, first things first, let's start with that front zipper pocket. So we're gonna attach our zipper. You should already have the interfacing applied to the exterior of your front accent panel, and then you're going to need the lining piece that is the same size as that accent panel. These are what we're gonna be working with first. Grab your zipper tape if you haven't trimmed it down already. I like to make it longer than it needs to be, and then I trim it down. Now, Justyna does like to add zipper pulls after the zipper install. It makes it much easier to install a zipper if there's no pull on it, but if you struggle to attach zipper pulls in general, that might stress you out just a little bit because it could be off. So I'm gonna show you, I attach my zipper pulls first, and then I install the zipper. So I'm going to show you how I do that. All right, so I have my bottom exterior panel and my zipper. I want the zipper to go to the left when closed, so I have it set up like that. And I'm just going to take it and lay it wrong side down. And like I said, my zipper tape is longer than the panel, so I can just grab my clips and clip them right sides together. And I'm just going to make sure I have overhang on both sides. I'm not so worried about the center or anything like that. All right, to make this install just a little bit easier, I'm going to base stitch the zipper to the front panel at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance just to hold the zipper in place before we attach the lining. All right, once you have that zipper basted in place, grab your lining material and lay it right side down along the back of your zipper facing the right side of that accent panel, and just make sure it's perfectly lined up on all of the edges, and then grab some clips and clip them together. All right, now let's sew along this clipped edge at 3/8 inch seam allowance. Once you have these sewn together, let's press them so that the lining and the exterior are wrong sides together. So what I like to do is I like to line up the bottom edges first and clip those together, and that will help me get a nice tight and straight line on the top edge. So there we go, I've got those clipped, and I can flip it over and just kind of push down right here. And it should really just hug right around that Decoville light. If you added it, that should be just right along the top edge here. Okay, now we're going to top stitch along this top edge at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. All right, so now we're going to attach the top part of the zipper panel. So grab your top accent panel, and then also grab that piece of lining that's like the middle size. Remember I said you have 3 cuts of lining for this whole pocket? This is the middle one. So we're going to attach the top accent panel to the top edge of the zipper. So just lay them right side down. Make sure the bottom edge of that accent panel does not have the Decoville light. And just make sure it's lined up with the edges of the bottom panel. Okay, so I'm going to baste this accent panel down first on my zipper at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. So once you have your top panel basted on, flip this so that you're looking at the right side of the lining piece, and grab that extra lining piece and lay it right side down. So the lining's right sides together, but line up the top edge with the top of your zipper. And again, just make sure the side edges are all matched up, and clip this in place to the zipper. Okay, now we're going to sew along this edge at 3/8 inch seam allowance. All right, once that's sewn together, make sure this lining panel you just attached stays down. Okay, we're not flipping that up. That's going to stay down, and only flip up the top accent panel. So if you look at from the back, everything is up behind the accent panel. The lining is down, right sides together with the other lining. So give this a good press, and now let's top stitch along this edge by the zipper at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Okay, before I move on to the next step, I'm going to quickly add my bag tag. Now I like to add my bag tag on the bottom part of the accent panel, anywhere between 2 inches or 1.5 inches down from the zipper. So I marked a small dot here that is centered and 1.5 inches down from my zipper, and I'm going to use my washer to help me mark the placement for the prongs for my metal bag tag. You could also use a sew-on bag tag. Just think about where you want to put it before you get started, because it's so frustrating when you finish a bag and you realize, dang it, I forgot to put a tag on it. Because those bags usually end up being the best ones you've ever made, and you don't even have your name on it to prove you did it. So I'm just using my seam ripper here to cut slits where I marked. And I'm only going through the exterior. I'm not going through any of the lining. I'm only going through the exterior accent and that Decoville light. The Decoville light provides a nice firmness to hold our tag in place. And then I'll just insert my bag tag just like that. Flip it over, add my washer, push down the prongs. And now I'm going to use a scrap piece of fusible fleece and some of this Beacon 3-in-1 glue. And I'm just going to glue the fusible fleece over the back of those prongs so that those middle prongs don't rub against my lining and end up causing any sort of a hole. All right, there we go. Easy peasy. Somewhat straight. There we go. Okay, now let's move on. This is your last lining panel for the front pocket. It's the biggest one, and we're going to lay it right sides down against the top edge of our accent piece, just like this. Now let's sew along this top clipped edge at 3/8 inch seam allowance. All right, this is another little detail that Justyna really likes to do, and I love it. But what you're gonna do is you're gonna flip this lining so that it goes back. And now we're gonna take our lining and we're gonna fold it all the way down, lining wrong sides together, to the bottom of our pocket over here. Now, you might need to kind of clip some of these first. I know it likes to get a little wonky over here. Let's clip this bottom first so that that doesn't start moving around on us while we flip this down. Okay, and then we're gonna clip that lining to the bottom where we already have our clips, holding everything in place. Okay, so now you have this situation where nothing quite fits, right? So we're gonna flatten this out and push down that top, see? And what happens is that top ends up folding over by about 1 inch. So if you wanna get your ruler out and measure this, kind of pull on it. I know it's a little tricky because the lining right here likes to kind of pucker up. So you might wanna grab an iron and press that down really well first. But you are creasing that Decoville light that's under that top accent panel. All right, so my little border back here, it's a little bit less than 1 inch, that's okay. Just get it flat. So grab your iron, whatever you need to do, get it flat. I'm just gonna push it down. Okay, so once you have it nice and flat and it's not all wavy or wonky, it's flat, you know, in a rectangle, let's top stitch along this fold right here at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. All right, so there you go. Isn't this cool? So this is what gives you a zip pocket, and on the back, this is a slip pocket, and then the detail from that accent fabric just kind of folds over. We're gonna do this again at the top of the bag. It's a very, very cool and unique design. I love that. So now we're going to install a magnetic snap, because actually this is not a slip pocket. This is a magnetic snap slip pocket, which is fantastic. You could skip the magnetic snap if you really want to. I suggest doing it though. Why not? Just do it. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna fold this in half so we can find the midpoint on the top of the back edge here. So that little accent up there, we're just gonna fold this in half. And she does provide you measurements for this, but I am just gonna eyeball this. So by folding this in half and pinching it, I found the midpoint of the top edge. But now I also wanna find the midpoint of the middle of this. So that honestly is just eyeballing it. I'm just gonna mark the middle. There we go. Because what we wanna do is we wanna attach one of our snaps right here in the middle. And you don't want your snap to be overhanging the top and then the back of the metal showing or anything like that. You want this to be as clean as possible. So once you have your middle marked with just a small dot, grab a washer for your magnetic snaps. And then my washer has like a little circle in it, and I'm just gonna use that to line it up, make sure it's centered, it's not overhanging the top edge too much or overhanging the lining here too much. Should be right in the middle. And then I'm going to mark the slits for the prongs of my magnetic snap. Okay, now we're going to use our seam ripper and we're going to open all this up. So we're only going, so you can see I can kind of open this up like this. We're only going through the folded over edge of that accent fabric. We're not going through the front of that accent fabric, only the back folded over edge. So just be very careful, use your seam ripper and just ever so gently create slits for the prongs. There we go. And now you're gonna take the male end of your magnetic snap, insert the prongs into the back, give it a quick look, make sure it's good. There we go, it's not gonna get in the way of anything. And then just flip to the back side here, take your washer and put it over the magnetic snap prongs, and then pull those prongs down. And since you have the Decoville light here, you really don't need to add any other interfacing. That should protect the fabric really well. And now you have part of your snap installed. This is so cute. All right, next, grab your waterproof canvas piece. And if you haven't already installed your zipper pull, make sure you do that now. And we have a lot of loosey-goosey pieces here for the lining. If you want, you can line them all up and baste them together. But I think I'll be okay just lining them up on the edges and using clips to hold that. Because we have 3 cuts of lining fabric down here, and then we also have that 1 cut of accent fabric. So if you're not careful, they can kind of go a little wild. And you might not catch them in your seam. So let's just use some clips to hold the sides down. And now we're going to take this accent pocket and we're going to line it up with the bottom edge of our waterproof canvas. Our waterproof canvas is right side up, And it should just match up perfectly with the sides and the bottom. All right, once you have this pocket clipped in place, let's go ahead and baste along the sides and the bottom at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance just to hold everything together. All right, once that's attached, if you want to go ahead and trim down your zipper tape, you can do it now. I always find it's easiest to do it by looking at the back side. All right, isn't this looking cute? I love this. So now we're going to attach the other end of our magnetic snap. And I actually find this is easiest if I just flip it over to the wrong side. And then I'm just feeling for the male end of the magnetic snap. I mean, it's kind of pokey, you can feel that. And then I'll grab my marking pen here and I'm just gonna mark right where that dot is. And that will help me place my magnetic snap. So now I can just take my washer for my female end and line that up over that center mark and just mark the slits for the prongs. There we go. And then carefully, I'm going to put my hand in here so I don't want to seam rip through any of the front pocket. I'm only going through this waterproof canvas. I'm going to just very gently seam rip along those slits. It's better for your cuts to be on the smaller side rather than on the larger side. And then going back to the right side of the waterproof canvas, I can just insert the prongs into those marks like that. Test it out real quick, and it should be perfect placement. There we go. Now I'm going to attach the washer on the back here and push down. And for this one, I am going to attach a piece of scrap fusible fleece. I'm just going to use this cut here and this Beacon 3-in-1 glue. Add some glue to the back of my fusible fleece. I know my fusible fleece is fusible, so it's like, why are you adding glue? Honestly, because it's quicker and it's easier. It's kind of a pain to iron this on to the back of these things, so the glue is just easy and quick. And now I'll just glue this to cover those prongs. That way it protects the lining on the inside as well. All right, how cool is that? It's a little magnetic snap slip pocket, and it folds over. I mean, this is just such a really, really clever design. I love this. Okay, once you have that all installed, grab your 2 waterproof canvas strips and we're going to attach them to the sides of the panel like this just to widen it out. So face them right sides together with the accent panel and the other waterproof canvas. Grab some clips and clip here. And you might notice that this is starting to get kind of bulky. The seam right here is getting pretty thick. That's why we don't really want to use vinyl for this unless you're very comfortable working with thick seams. And if you're finding that you're having some issues with your thread kind of looping and everything, increase your tension. So for example, on my Bernina, the tension is automatically set at 5.5 when I'm just sewing, regularly. For this thickness here, I'll actually increase it to 6 3/4. And that's what my tension will be. And that helps prevent any sort of problems or thread breaks. So now let's sew along both of these clipped edges at a 3/8 inch seam allowance. Alrighty, there we go. Got them sewn on. And now what we're going to do is we're going to just push these back. And if you like, you can press it with an iron. I found with waterproof canvas, it's not always helpful to press with an iron. It's pretty much just the same as with my fingers. Some of you guys have requested that I share this more often. This is the Violet Craft seam roller, and you can just kind of roll down your seams. That's also really great if you have any sort of problems with your hands, like arthritis or anything like that. That'll help do that. Now you can see it just folds right back up, but what we're wanting is that crease. So just getting that bit of a crease there is all we need to top stitch this. So I'm just gonna press this down with my little rolling pin here. And now we're gonna go to the sewing machine and we're gonna top stitch along these edges on the waterproof canvas side at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. This is just gonna hold all the seams together. I know this is bulky. I know. Go slow. If you need to up your needle to a 90-14 or a jeans needle, go ahead and do that. This is a good project to kind of learn your machine a little bit more. Even if it's, a domestic machine, it can still sew through this if you're using the right things and you adjust your tension. So play with that. Go slow. You're going to love this. And then finally for the front panel, you're gonna grab your vinyl that goes on the bottom, and we're going to just attach this just like this. So line it up. If you have a directional print of your vinyl, make sure you know which side is up. And we're gonna just fold them right sides together, right along the bottom edge. It should be the same size as the top edge. That's why it's so important to make sure you're doing the right seam allowance all the time. Because if you did a 1/4 inch seam allowance, this might be a little bit bigger. You know, it can get a little messy. So I'm just gonna flip this around and clip together my vinyl bottom and the bottom of my front panel. I just love the design of this bag, guys. I love the look of this. It's such a clean, nice look. All right, now let's sew along this clipped edge at a 3/8 inch seam allowance. Once that vinyl bottom is stitched in place, just fold it back, finger press it, or use your pressing tool, whatever you'd like here. And now let's top stitch along this bottom edge at an 1/8 inch seam allowance. You'll notice I just kind of slowly press this as I go to keep it as straight as possible. Okay, so before we attach this webbing, let's add a little bit of interfacing. I'm in a few different Facebook groups, and I've seen this problem a lot lately where bag connectors are, where strap connectors are, even if they're just connected to the vinyl starts eventually ripping because it gets so much use, especially on backpacks. So let's just beef this up as much as we possibly can. If your machine can handle sewing over Decovil Heavy, add Decovil Heavy here. Otherwise, add Decovil Light, fusible fleece, something. Let's add some extra beef here. So I'm going to just I'm cutting like 1 inch, 1.5 inch strips. And then maybe 4 inches or 3 inches. They're not big, but what I want to do is I just want to actually fuse them right to the corners where I will be adding my tabs here for the backpack. So I'm just going to take this to the iron real quick, and I'm going to iron the back of my vinyl just to press these pieces of Decovil Light into place. Make sure that they are close to the top edge here. So we'll be installing these 3/4 inch down from the top edge, so it needs to be covering much of the side. It doesn't need to cover the bottom edge here, but it needs to cover pretty much from the bottom to about 1 inch from the bottom. Okay, so I fused these onto the bottom edges here like you can see, but I just want to show you this vinyl. Look at this. Oh, it's starting to fade. But the iron, you know, it's hot. So this is the cooler part. This is the warmer part. This vinyl is so cool. I highly encourage everybody to get this vinyl. I'll have a link down below. You know I will. Okay, so back to the strap tabs. Okay, so let's grab our 2 cuts of our little nylon webbing and let's wrap it around the straight edge of the D-ring. And just clip it in place. Do this for both of them. Flip your front panel right side up. Okay, and what we want to do is we want to place these tabs so they're 3/4 inch down from this seam right here, and that the tab overhangs 1/2 inch. So to make that a little bit easier, I actually like to take my ruler and line it up with the raw edges. It can just be one of them, honestly. But line it up with the raw edge of my strap tab. Grab any sort of marking tool and mark a straight line. This won't be seen in the end, so don't worry about it. But there we go. Now I have this, it's hard to see, but I have a straight gray line right here. So then I can rewrap this around my D-ring. And just make sure you do it on the side that you're going to be having up over here. So then I'll use my ruler to mark 3/4 inch down. And again, you can use a marking device here if you want and just mark it right on the edge of your material. And now when I pin this in place, I'm going to make sure that the line that I marked on my little connector here just runs right along that edge of my vinyl, and the top edge of my connector is right where that marked line is. Using your utensils to mark things makes all of this much easier. This can be a very kind of frustrating step if you're just trying to do it without any sort of help. You're just trying to use a ruler and make sure it stays that way. This way, if things move around and you get to the machine, you can readjust it. You know where it's supposed to go. So let's do the same thing on both sides. Remember, the D-rings are facing in towards the center of the vinyl, and there's a 1/2 inch overhang with your strap tabs on the sides. All right, now let's take this to the sewing machine and just baste these in place. You can do it at a 1/4 inch or an 1/8 inch seam allowance. Just make sure that these are nice and secure to the bottom edges of your front panel. Also make sure that they are going over that Decovil Light. So it looks good. All right, your front panel is done. She does give you the measurements that this should be, so make sure you grab a ruler and you check that. Use the grid on your cutting mat to help. If it's a little bit taller than it needs to be, go ahead and trim off the bottom down here. If you're using any sort of a nylon or polyester webbing, you can take a lighter and melt the edges of it so that it doesn't fray. You can see I have a little bit of fray over here, but that is easy to fix. Just melt it and you won't have to worry about that anymore. All right, go ahead and put this to the side. All right, so now we're gonna work on that back panel. So take your back vinyl and lay it wrong side up. You're gonna draw a series of straight lines here to create this inner rectangle. Now, this back panel is supposed to be vinyl because we are just going to cut out this hole here and we're going to have raw edges. So if you're using any sort of a quilt cotton or anything like that, this method's not gonna work for you. You're gonna have to install the zipper another way by drawing the little triangles, slit, folding, you know what I mean, doing it that way. But since we're using vinyl, we are just gonna leave these as raw edges. So what I like to do is grab my seam ripper and start ripping in the center of that rectangle just like that. And that just makes a big enough hole for me to grab my scissors. And I like to just pretty much cut down the middle and then over towards the corners. So I do still make those like little triangles, but that just makes it easier for me to cut this along the marked line. So we're cutting right on the marked inner rectangle to create a little hole. You can use an X-Acto knife here if you'd prefer. Scissors also work. All right, so can you see? That creates just this nice little window. And if you're using vinyl, raw edges are totally fine. Otherwise, like I said, you will have to install this a different way. All right, so grab your lining panel and then grab your zipper tape. And if you haven't already, let's cut our zipper tape. Once again, I'm going to cut my zipper tape longer than it needs to be. You can cut it the exact right size. There's not gonna be a whole lot of shifting here. You should be fine. So again, in the pattern, they do suggest that you add the zipper pull at a later step, but I'm going to show you how to do this with the zipper pull already installed. Okay, so grab your lining panel and lay it right side up, and grab your zipper and lay your zipper right side up. Now, whichever way you want the zipper to go when closed, if you want to go to the left when closed or right, you're going to install this the opposite direction because we're going to flip it around. So for me, I want the zipper pull to be going towards the left when closed. In the pattern, they do suggest having it go towards the right at a later step. Totally up to you. Honestly, whichever way you do it, it's going to be fine. It's not going to be an issue by any means. But I'm just letting you know. So I'm going to have my zipper going to the right when closed, and I'm going to line it up with the top edge of my lining panel. Everything is right side up. I'm going to grab some clips and just clip this right along that top edge. Now we're going to sew along this clipped edge at a 1/4 inch seam allowance. All right, once you have this sewn on, we're going to flip this so that the zipper tape presses along the wrong side of your lining. Now, if you're using quilt cotton here, you can definitely just iron this. Even this material might be okay just being ironed, but what I like to do is stitch it down. So I'm gonna go back to the sewing machine and I'm going to keep this nice and flat. That'll be good. And I'm going to stitch at about 1/8 of an inch away from the edge of my zipper tape, and that's really just gonna flatten this out. Because pretty much what we wanna do is flatten it out and then plop this over it. This just makes it a little bit easier if you add another row of stitching. Okay, so now take your pocket so that the zipper's right side up, and then take some double-sided tape and lay the double-sided tape right along that bottom edge of your zipper tape. All right, you can take the paper backing off your tape, and now take your vinyl with the zipper pocket window, and we want to center this over there. So what you might want to do is kind of lay your vinyl down and then flip it up, because you don't want to, have the zipper all the way to one side or the other. So we want this to be as centered as possible, and then we can just kind of inch it up. Get that zipper so that it's right in the center. If you have a zipper pull on, go ahead and pull all the way to the side. The nice thing about tape is if it's not right the first time, you can just lift up your vinyl and try again. Alrighty, so then just give it a check on the back and make sure it's pretty centered. It's overhanging everything. There we go. Alright, looks good. Now what we're going to do is we're going to just stitch along this bottom edge at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. If you want, you can backstitch at the beginning and the end. I do suggest you do the tails method, so we're going to leave long tails for our top and bobbin threads at the beginning and the end. We're not going to do any backstitching, and then we'll tie a knot on the back to secure it in place. That way it just looks like one clean stitch, and when we attach it to the stitching later, you won't really be able to tell we did it in pieces. Okay, so do you see what I mean by tails? These are my top thread tails. And on the back here, I have my bobbin tails. So what I'm gonna do is just gently pull on my bobbin tail, and I can actually see some of my top thread kind of loop through. I'm just gonna use my stiletto and help pull that top thread to the back. See, so now I have 2 over here. I'm gonna do the same thing on the other side. All right, and now I'm just going to tie a double or triple knot using these 2 pieces of thread on each side. And then you can cut those tails nice and short, close to the knot. And then, as long as your thread is polyester, you can grab a lighter and you can just kind of burn the edges so that they tuck in. And this just also melts that little knot so that it's nice and secure and out of the way, partially invisible. Alrighty, so we've got the bottom edge top stitch in place. If you haven't already, go ahead and install your zipper. She does suggest you go from left to right, so whichever way you want to do, install your zipper now. Now flip your panel over so it's wrong side up, and take the bottom edge of your lining and fold it up to meet the top edge of the zipper. Make sure the sides are lined up really well. And what's going to make this easiest is if you use some double-sided tape. So let's add some double-sided tape to the back of the top edge of our zipper tape along the entire bit. And then take the paper off. And then take the bottom edge of your lining fabric and line it up. Again, making sure everything is straight. There we go. Alrighty, perfect. If you have a little bit of tape overhang here, you might want to cut that off. You don't want that sticking to your sewing machine floor whenever you're stitching this down. Okay, now that that's in place, we're going to flip this back over. And now what we're going to do is we're going to continue top stitching around this rectangle. So we're going to start at one edge and we're going to go up the side, over, down the other side. I do like to backstitch over the zipper coils. I know that's not always the cleanest look. Just depending on the thread you're using, you might want to do that because if that thread breaks, it's going to be kind of a pain to fix it later. Top stitching it just makes sure that when you're opening and closing this a lot, those threads will just stay secure. So now we're going to go around and continue on at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. All right, as you can see, I left the tails once again, so I'm just going to flip this to the wrong side. And I'm going to pull back those top threads. And just like before, I'm going to knot them, and then I can burn them as well. So now we have the zipper completely installed. Now all we have to do is stitch the sides of our pocket closed. So just tug it, get it nice and flat. Use some clips if it helps. I like to just clip along these open edges after flattening out with my hands. And now we're going to stitch along these sides. So it makes it easiest if you do your back panel right side up and then just flip the back panel back and stitch along these sides anywhere between 1/4 of an inch and 3/8 of an inch. You just want to close it. You can cut down your zipper tape if you'd like so that it's smaller. I do like to go over it and just leave it longer. As long as the zipper tape doesn't get into the edges over here of the seam, I don't see any problem with it being a little bit longer than it needs to be. All right, once you have the back panel all done, grab your front panel and we're going to attach them together. So take your front panel and your back panel and lay them right sides together. Make sure those D-rings are inside. And what we're most concerned about here is the bottom edge. That's where we're gonna sew first. So make sure the sides are lined up as well, but we're most focused on this bottom edge here. So let's just clip along the bottom edge once you have it all lined up. Now let's sew along this clipped edge at 3/8 inch seam allowance. Okay, once you have these sewn together, what you wanna do is open this up and press open that seam. And I know it's a little tricky depending on the kind of vinyl you're using. But you want to press open that seam, and then what we're going to do is from the right side, we're going to top stitch along both edges of that seam, making sure we're catching the bottom seam here and just keeping it really flat. I mean, that's the point of this, is to get this as flat as possible. So go along and top stitch this at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance on both sides. You'll notice for me, I kind of lift up and put my hand underneath it and lift it up as I'm going and just push along that seam just to make sure it stays there. If you like, you can also use glue or double-sided tape to hold it in place. Just do your best to catch it really well underneath here. So once you have this all top stitched, you're gonna mark a midpoint mark right here on that seam. And then you're gonna mark 3 inches away on each side and then 1 inch up. So per the pattern, you're gonna put a purse foot here in the center and then 1 here on the top and the bottom, and then same on the other side for a total of 5. I'm only gonna be adding 4 because I don't like adding a purse foot right on this seam. There's really no way for me to add my purse foot without it cutting into these stitches, and I don't like to cut stitches, so I'm just going to leave the middle one alone and I'll add the 2 on each side. And I found that that's fine. This isn't such a big bag that it's going to cause any sort of problem. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to cut the slits for the purse feet first, and then I'm going to attach the base, because when I cut the slits, that'll give me a little mark on the back side of the vinyl so I know exactly where to place this. So you can see with my purse feet here, they have these long prongs. So when I open them up, they're going to take up a lot of space. I want to make sure when I open them up, they go left to right along and parallel to this seam right here. So I don't want to install my washer like this, where the prongs would end up going up towards the top and down towards the bottom. I want to install my washer like this, so the prongs go side to side. This will also help make sure that the prongs stay behind the Decoville heavy after I get that fused on. So I'm just going to make sure I mark my lines. And now I'm going to very gently use my seam ripper to rip right along those lines. Remember, just like we did with the magnetic snaps, it's better for these to be on the smaller side than on the bigger side. A tight fit is ideal for these types of prongs. Okay, so now I have those slits marked. When I flip this over, I can kind of see where they are. And if I really need to, I can use those little slits and kind of poke them with my finger to find them, and then mark them with a pen on the back again. The goal for this is that I just want to make sure my Decoville heavy covers those purse feet. Okay, so before we install the purse feet, we do want to fuse on our Decoville heavy. You can fuse this, or you can use glue. Even if you just use the purse feet, that will be fine as well. I'm going to use glue here. So you can see I just used a generous amount of glue. This is just one of the cuts of Decoville heavy. And I'm going to line this up so that it is centered and covering my marks for my purse feet. And if you need help, each side of my Decoville heavy is about 2 1/4 inches from the raw edges of the outer panel. So I'm just doing my best to keep it centered. Once I have one piece down, I'm just going to glue on the other one right on top of it. Now I'm going to flip this back over to the right side, and I'm going to have to recut those slits because now I have to go through the Decoville heavy as well. And you can see the vinyl pen I'm using, it wipes off. That's why it's kind of smudged over here. So it looks a little messy, but it'll be fine. So I'm just going to recut very gently those same slits so that I'm going through the Decoville heavy as well. All right, now that everything is cut, I can just take a purse foot, separate the prongs a little bit, and I'm going to insert these prongs into the slits. And it should go through the exterior vinyl as well as the Decoville heavy. Once I have the purse foot installed from the front, I can go to the back, and then I'll use the correct washer this time. And you can see I just attached the washer over the back like that. I'll be honest, I used the wrong washer to mark my slits. I used the magnetic snap washer instead of the purse foot washer, which is a little bit more narrow. So these are a little pinched on the bottom, but they seem okay. Seems like we'll be okay. Luckily, these prongs are so long, they can kind of wrap around and meet back on the other side. Okay, so now my purse feet are installed. I'm going to flip my exterior panels right sides together just like this and line them up along the edges. And now I'm just going to clip all the way down the edge. And then down here, they should meet up perfectly at that bottom seam. Just make sure you keep everything squared up. So I have one side clipped. I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing with the other side. So now let's sew along both of these clipped seams at 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. Make sure you backstitch at the top and you go all the way down to the bottom here. All right, there we go. And you may have noticed I did a second row of stitching right around the little connectors here. You know what? I probably should have also added some Decoville light to the other side of the exterior panel. This is the back side here. So if you are watching this and you haven't done it yet, make sure you add another piece of Decoville light here on the back panel, just like you did on the front panel to protect it. But if you forgot, you should be okay. All right, so now we want to box these corners. So you're going to measure 1 inch from the stitching and 1 inch from this bottom edge here and make a little square. So once you have those little corners marked, you can grab your scissors and just cut along those marked lines to create a little square opening down here. All right, once you have these cut, now you can see how it naturally wants to go up like this. So we're going to let it do that. We're going to let the bottom edge come connect with the side seams. So you may want to pull on the sides towards the bottom of the bag more, and then just line this up so that the seam on the side here lines up with the seam on the bottom. And now you can try to press open the seams on the side. You can leave them to one side as well. You'll be okay if the seams are not pressed open here. Do the same thing on the other side. So once we have these clipped, we're going to sew along this cut edge right here at 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. And then we're going to do another row of stitching just to the inside, closer to the raw edges, away from that stitching. So double stitch here. Once you have that double sewn, you can trim down the seam allowance just a little bit to help prevent the bulk. And now let's turn this right side out and take a look. All right, so that is looking so cool. I love these little purse feet down here. Now you can go ahead and set this to the side. The outer part of your bag is now done. Now let's work on the lining. So you have your 2 bigger pieces of lining. Those are just your lining main panels. And then you have the smaller piece, which is your lining slip pocket. So take your lining slip pocket and fold it right sides together along the longer edge. So you have a longer edge. This is also the edge that's the same width as your main panel, just like that. So we're going to fold along that longer edge, right sides together. Okay, now let's just sew along this pinned edge here at a 3/8 inch seam allowance. All right, once you have that done, flip this so that it's right side out. And now once it's flipped out, you want to just press along the seam and then along the top edge as well. So take your iron and give it a good press to get it nice and flat. All right, once you have it pressed nice and flat, now we're going to top stitch along the folded top. So the side with the seam is on the bottom, and this folded top up here, we're just going to top stitch at an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. So now measure 4 inches from the bottom edge of your lining panel and line up your little slip pocket so that the bottom edge with the seam is on the bottom. You understand. The top edge with the top stitching is on the top up here. The bottom edge is 4 inches from the bottom of the lining panel. And now let's just top stitch along the sides and the bottom of our slip pocket at an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. All right, once you have these top stitched on, you can divide up these pockets however you like. What I'm going to do is I'm going to do 3.5 inches in from each edge. You can see I drew these lines here, and I'm just going to top stitch right over it. And pretty much what I do is I just start at the bottom, go right up to the top, and then just go right back down to the bottom. I'm going to do this on both of these to create 3 small pockets inside the bag. Alrighty, there we go. Now we have our slip pocket. So take your remaining lining panel and lay it right sides together with the lining panel with the slip pocket. Just line up all the edges really well. Grab your clips to hold all the lining together. Make sure you double check that you didn't close the top. Alright, that's the top. Okay, so measure a 5-inch opening here on the bottom edge, and this is going to be left open. So we're going to start at one side, and we're just going to go along the bottom all the way up to the top using a 3/8 inch seam allowance. Make sure you backstitch at this mark, and make sure you also backstitch at the top. You're going to do this on both sides. All right, after you have that sewn, you're gonna make 1-inch boxes down here on the bottom corners, but you're gonna measure from the stitching, not from the sides of the raw edges of your fabric. So just line up your ruler on the stitching and then make little 1-inch boxes. And then just cut along those marked lines. And then, just like we did on the exterior, you're gonna kind of pull towards the center and separate those seams. And then bring the side seam and the bottom seam together, and I just rotate the seams in opposite direction. I don't spread them open or anything like that. And just clip along those edges. All right, now let's sew along these two box clipped edges at a 3/8 inch seam allowance. All right, now your lining is done. So now keep your lining wrong side out and take your exterior right side out. And we're going to put the exterior inside the lining. The slip pocket part of your lining should be on the same side as the back of your bag. So the front of your bag is going to go against the lining side that doesn't have anything on it. You will notice your lining is smaller than your exterior of your bag. It's supposed to be like that. So you're going to have to really shove it in there. Don't worry about getting your bag wrinkly. We can clean it up later. So now, let's first line up the seams on the top. So I usually like to just clip them in opposite directions like that. Do this on both sides. And then we're going to clip around the entire top edge. So just make sure you're lining up your lining and your exterior really well. All right, now we're just going to sew along this top edge at a 3/8 inch seam allowance. All right, now we're going to push the bag out through the hole in the lining. So I'll tell you, the hardest part to get out is that base with those feet and that decoupable heavy. So work on that first. Push out the rest of the bag. There we go. So reach in and push out the bottom. That one's so good. And now you're going to push in the lining, and you'll notice your lining is quite a bit smaller. That's because what we're actually going to do is flip part of the exterior down. So if you've ever made these bags where the seam is along the top edge and then you have to top stitch over it, and then you know it always breaks right here around this bulk, we're not going to do that today. We're actually going to just push the lining down, and then this top exterior edge should extend 3/4 inch. So here's what I do. I grab my small ruler and I line up the edge with the seam to the lining, and I push down on the exterior until I get the exterior at the 3/4 inch mark, and then I add a clip right there on that exterior. And I'm going to go around the whole top edge doing this. And this way I know the top edge is overhanging 3/4 inch consistently around the entire top, and it's not going to be all wavy at different lengths. All right, so you can see I have the entire top edge clipped. If you look inside, it folds over 3/4 inch. That's such a cool look. So now we're going to go and we're going to top stitch around this edge. And I'll tell you, this top stitching is much easier than top stitching when the seam is all the way on the top. This is much easier here. It's not as bulky. And we're going to top stitch at an 1/8 inch seam allowance. I did take the bed off my sewing machine so that I can just kind of wrap this around the arm and top stitch with the bag just like this. See how you have it just top stitch? And I like how the lining kind of poofs out like that. It's a really cool look. And you don't have a zip or anything you have to worry about. However, we are now going to install a magnetic snap up here. All right, so now we want to find placement for our magnetic snaps. So we want to do it along the center on the inside of our bag. Remember, we haven't closed our lining yet, and this is the reason why. So I'm going to pull this and match up the side seams together just like this. And then just pinch along this back panel. And then with it pinched, I can kind of mark right where that midpoint is. There we go. And now I just want to center my magnetic snap. So you see, here's my washer. And when I lay this over, I want it to be in the middle, and I don't want to be cutting into any stitching. So remember, it can overlap the stitching, but you don't want to cut into it, and you don't want the magnetic snap to come pop up over the edge here. So I'm just going to use my washer in that midpoint line to mark placement for the prongs. So now pull out the lining a bit, and you're going to reach into the lining so that you can pull this top edge here. And we can seam rip along our marked lines without seam ripping through the front of the bag or the lining. So just ever so gently, right along those small lines. Now take the female magnetic snap and insert it into those slits. Let's see if I can pull this out. There we go. So I pulled out the back of the magnetic snap so we can put our washer over it. And then push it down. And if you want to add a little bit of extra protection, you can still cut a piece of fusible fleece. You could also add this fusible fleece between the magnetic snap and the washer on the back side of the lining, and that would help keep it nice and firm. I'm just going to glue this on over the back of my magnetic snap, and then I'll push this back in and fold it over. And there we go. You see how that's installed there? It's nice and clean. Perfect. So now you can just use placement for that to help you find the other center, or you can just find the center like you did previously. But I'm just going to pinch along here. And so I have it pinched right where the magnetic snap is, and all I have to do is kind of fold back this overhang on the front and then mark a dot right where that magnetic snap is. It's pretty simple. And just like we did on the back, I'm going to use a washer here to make sure I don't go too high or too low. And then mark placement for the prongs. Once again, I'm going to pull out the lining. And this just allows me to kind of better see everything. So I can flip this out and I can see those placement marks better. And then I'm going to use my seam ripper to rip right along those slits. Take the male end of the magnetic snap and insert it. And here we go, I pulled out the back of it through the lining, and so then I take my washer and I separate just like that. And last, I will once again add a piece of glue to my fusible fleece, or add my fusible fleece with glue on the back to the back of this washer to protect it. And I'll slip it back in. All right, so let's take a look, make sure it all works. Oh yeah, that looks great, doesn't it? So this just is a small closure for the top of the bag. I love it. All right, now let's just close up the bottom of the lining. So pull the lining all the way out. And what I like to do is just put my fingers in that hole and just kind of pull on it a little bit. It naturally wants to fold in on itself. Don't worry too much about how much exactly it's folding in. Just get those raw edges folded into the bag and clip along the fold down here. And now let's sew along this clipped edge at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. So once that's sewn shut, just push your lining into your bag. And there we go. The bag portion is done. It's looking so good. So now we're going to add the grommets to the top. So I'm going to start with the front of the bag. First thing I want to do is find the center of the front of the bag. So we can just kind of pinch it like this. But you can also find the center because that's where your magnetic snap is. And I just have a pin here, and I'm just ever so gently just putting it right along the top edge. I just need to mark the center, but I don't actually want to mark the center because I'm not going to be cutting the center or anything. So I marked the center just like that with that pin. And now I'm going to measure 3 inches to each side of that marked center for placement for my grommet. Now, the grommet placement can be a little tricky because here's the thing. You don't want it to be so high that it comes over the top of your bag, but you don't want it to be so low that it's cutting into the vinyl either. So on the side, I'm going to mark 3 inches away from the midpoint mark out to the right and 3/8 of an inch down from the top edge. And I'll mark a dot right there. I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. 3 inches away from the midpoint and 3/8 of an inch from the top edge. Okay, so I have my marks, and that's where I'm going to put my hole. So I got my rivet press out, and I'm going to just install the hole punch die. Now this is a 12mm hole punch die. I'm just going to screw it in. And now I'm going to carefully put my bag onto my die, and I'm also making sure that I'm actively like pushing the lining out of the way because the lining wants to roll up a little bit and I don't want to accidentally clip my lining. I just want to go through the exterior here. And then I'm just going to punch a hole right over that dot. And I'm going to check the back. Okay, good. So you can see I went through the exterior, but I didn't go through my lining. But you see how the lining puffs up? The thing is if it puffs up and you clip it, you're just going to have a little hole in your lining. It's not even going to be part of the grommet. So push it out of the way to make sure that doesn't happen. And then punch the other hole as well. All right, that looks great. So now let's go ahead and attach the grommet on this side and then we'll just repeat this for the back. So I'm gonna take out the hole punch dies and I'm gonna insert my grommet dies. This is again a 12mm die. And then here are my grommets. I have one that's like a cylinder shape and one that's a disc shape. The cylinder shape goes on the exterior, so that just pops right into that hole. And then we flip it over, and then the disc shape goes right over it on the back. Now it doesn't snap or anything, you do have to hold it in place. And then you're gonna take the front side down, and then the disc side goes up. And then press down. You see, and now we have this nice grommet. It does cover some of the stitching, but it doesn't go over the top edge of the bag, which is what I wanted. So I'm gonna repeat this with the other grommet. All right, so this is what we have. Here are our two grommets. So what I'm gonna do is I'm going to snap it shut and straighten it out, flatten it out, make sure the top edges of the back and the front are lined up. And then I'm gonna take my marking tool here and I'm gonna mark a dot on the back panel that's in the center of that grommet. There we go. And that will be my placement for punching a hole on the back. So open it up. I'm gonna go ahead and switch out my dies again. And then using those marks, I'm gonna punch holes on the back panel. All right, there we go. There's my holes back there. Now I'm just going to insert my grommets. Now I can just press these grommets in. All right, there we go. Now our grommets are all installed. That looks awesome. And now the bag portion is done. We just have to do the strap. All right, so I have my strap and it's 65 inches long. Before we get started, I am going to just burn the edges of it so I don't have to deal with any fraying while we're working with it. You're gonna need your last piece of vinyl. Now I decided to cut my vinyl a 1/4 inch taller than it needs to be. So I kept the width the same, the long side the same, but I added a 1/4 inch to the height here to make wrapping it around the strap a little bit easier. So the pattern says to fold in these short edges wrong sides together by 1/4 inch. I found that a little difficult with a thicker vinyl, so I'm gonna do it by 3/8 inch. So to do that, I marked a line here on the short edge that's 3/4 inch, 3/4 inch away from the short edge. And then I just fold that short raw edge up to meet that line and then clip along the fold. So once you have this folded in, now we're going to top stitch along these clipped edges at 1/8 inch seam allowance. Okay, so take your strap and find the midpoint. I'm just gonna mark it with a pen. And then take your handle and you can find the midpoint on that as well. And now with the handle part right side up, match up the midpoint with your handle with the midpoint on the strap. Just like that. And then use some clips to hold this in place, or you can use double-sided tape here. Whatever helps you hold this where it needs to be. And now let's top stitch along this edge. So we're attaching it to the strap. We're gonna top stitch it at 1/8 inch seam allowance. All right, so now what we're pretty much gonna do is just wrap this around the strap like that. But for this raw edge here, we do want to fold that in. So she suggests folding it in 1/2 inch and then bringing it over. And now what I want to do is I want to make sure when I bring this over that I can top stitch it, and I don't want to top stitch it straight down the center. I want to top stitch it closer to the edge over here, so when I add my rivets in the center, I don't go through the top stitching. So that's why I increased the height of this by just a bit. And so I'm just gonna wrap it all around, and you see how it overhangs, the raw edge overhangs. So what I'm gonna do is I marked a line right here that's 3/4 inch from this leftover raw edge, and I'm gonna fold the raw edge up to meet it. And now we're gonna take this to the sewing machine and we're just gonna top stitch along this folded edge at 1/8 inch seam allowance. Okay, so now you can see, we can wrap this around the strap all the way around just like this. And I like it to overhang just a bit. I like it to go closer to the edge rather than the seam going right down the middle, because that way when I attach my rivets, I'm not going to accidentally rivet through the stitching over here on the exterior. Here we go. All right, so I made 4 marks going along this very center of the strap, and they're each about 1 inch apart. So now I'm gonna grab my rivet press that has the hole punch, and I'm gonna grab some rivets. And I'm just gonna carefully punch holes through these holes. Now I'm going through the back, through the strap, and through the front. The rivet's going all the way through everything. And once I have 1 hole punched, I'll grab a rivet and just pop it in there, because rivets are nice. They just snap shut like that, and you can leave them there until you're ready to press them. All right, so you can remove those clips. Isn't this a cool look? I just think that looks so cool on this. I love this strap. This checkers is so cool. All right, so I'm just gonna quickly grab my rivet die, and I'm just gonna press these rivets down, and we can finish up the strap. There we go, so cool. So now grab your bag, and we're gonna thread this through there. So take your strap and thread it through one of the front grommets over here on the left. And then I'm gonna try to keep it as straight as I can. It likes to kind of twirl around. And I could probably, I don't know if I could have used bigger grommets. I feel like a bigger grommet would work well with the strap, but I think it would be too big for the space up there. So you just wanna keep it centered. Man, this bag is cool. So you're gonna thread it through the front grommets as well as the back grommets. And just do your best to keep the strap straight. You can always straighten it out later though. I know mine gets all twisted around. So you can just thread it and then straighten it. So let's now do the bottom part. So grab your strap end and your adjuster and your swivel hook. Now we're gonna slide the strap end up and over the middle bar in our adjuster. And there we go. And then we're gonna attach the swivel so that the swivel part is up on the same side that the top of the adjuster is up. And then you're gonna flip your strap over and you're gonna create like a circle. So it's not gonna go underneath like this, it's gonna go from the top of the adjuster. So see if I can show you this. See how I'm gonna bring this up, and then I'm gonna let's put a bit of slack over here. So you can see on my adjuster here, I have a nice big lump there. So I'm gonna take my raw edge and I'm gonna put it into the top part of my adjuster. So it goes into the top, comes into that little loop in there, and then comes back out the bottom, just like this. So now I have just the raw edge kind of tied around that adjuster middle bar, and I just want it to be about 1 inch overhang or less, whatever you're comfortable with. And I'm gonna grab a couple clips here to hold that in place. So you see, this is what it looks like, and if I just kind of tighten it around the middle bar, it goes down like that. So we have this nice little loop here. We have our swivel hook, and you can see we'll be able to attach it to this bottom like this, and we have a little backpack. So cool. But we need to close off this raw edge over here. Now I'm going to leave the edge raw. I'm not going to double fold it. You definitely can, but I don't think with this type of cording it needs it. So you can add 1 or 2 rivets here. I'm gonna add 2 per the pattern. I think that provides a little bit of extra support as well. Just kind of eyeball it. Since I have this checkered pattern, I actually have perfect placements for it that are perfectly even from one another. Don't add them too close together because then they get all smushed up. All right, so I got my hole punch. I'm just gonna punch holes for those rivets. And then I can just insert the rivets real quick. And there we go. And this isn't something that's highly noticeable, so if your rivets are kind of wonky, don't worry about it. This is more just about making sure we're closing off that end. So I'm just gonna leave that for now, and I will press it after I do the same thing on the other side. So with the other strap, do the exact same thing. All right, so I have the remaining 2 snapped in there. So now I just have to grab my rivet press and carefully press each one of these down. Do this for both of your straps. And there you go. Now we can just snap it onto the bottom, and your bag is done. Look how stinking adorable this looks. It's not that hard either. And the cooler the stuff you use, oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. All right, I don't think that you or I are ready for this bag. This bag might be one of the coolest things I've ever made. Holy guacamole. This fabric, my girl, right? My girl, Leota. I love this. This is from Wonderground. We all know my love of Wonderground fabrics. And then this vinyl. So this right here, remember, is waterproof canvas, but this vinyl on the back with that heat color changing. My hands are not hot enough to make it happen right now. Oh my goodness, this bag. And the webbing. Oh, every bit of this. The zipper pulls, the webbing, the look at this. Did you know I actually bought myself a pair of checkered Vans sneakers? Or they're slip-ons. Checkered Vans slip-ons. Just so I can match it to my bag. Because this webbing is just so, it's so cool. Right? This bag is so cool. You know you have teens in your life. You have tweens in your life. You have parents, moms in your life who are gonna love this bag. So you can see I have it a little bit longer here, and I could wear this as a crossbody. See if I can get on my tippy toes. All right, got on my step stool, and you see how cute this is? This is an adorable crossbody bag. So especially thinking and speaking as a mom. If I'm wearing this bag as a crossbody, that's exactly how I need it. But you know, when I'm at the parks and I'm going, I can just turn it into a backpack, and I love that. It's so easy. I love a convertible bag so much. So I hope that you love making this pattern. If you make it, please make sure you tag me. Make sure you tag Justyna. I will have all of our information listed down below. Once again, thank you so much, Justyna. This pattern is thebomb.com. I absolutely love it. I hope that you enjoy sewing this. Thank you guys so much for sewing with me today. I hope you're having a great day. Have a fantastic rest of your week. Get out there and make something. Bye, guys.